I think your age is between 40 to 50, right? At least the analytics say it. In this video, we talk about 10 types of persons from toxic families. See if you relate to one or more of them. This is important for the victims, and just as, if not more important, for parents. Those who come from a background of alcohol or drug abuse experience a turbulent childhood and end up playing certain roles to alleviate the sadness, humiliation, or anger they feel. Family dynamics can also be shaped by other compulsive behaviors, such as gambling or overeating, as well as overly strict religious attitudes, narcissism, and physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. So let's just start the video. Subscribe to this channel if you're into philosophy, psychology, and hierarchy of society, and of course, dark truths. Let's begin the journey. Type 1. The scapegoat. Have you ever felt like the villain in someone else's story, no matter what you did? In a broken home, someone has to take the blame, and when the parents won't, the child must. The scapegoat is the family's emotional punching bag. They're the child who refuses to play along, the one who challenges the lies, the one who won't wear a mask to make the family look good. And for that, they become the problem. If something goes wrong, it's their fault. If the house is tense, it's because of their attitude. If a parent is abusive, it's because they provoked them. Even when they're innocent, they carry the guilt. To cope, the scapegoat often leans into the role. They become defiant, reckless, rebellious. If they're going to be blamed anyway, why bother trying to be good? They fight back at home, act out in school, and surround themselves with people who don't judge them, sometimes the wrong people. But this isn't just bad behavior, it's a survival tactic. Studies on reactance theory by Brehm suggest that when control is unfairly taken away, people push back harder. The scapegoat lashes out because it's the only power they have. But deep down, they aren't as tough as they seem. They've simply built walls because letting anyone in feels like another risk. And the sad irony? The same family that rejected them often needs them the most. They're the only ones willing to call out the dysfunction, to name the problem everyone else is pretending doesn't exist. Yet no one thanks the scapegoat. They either escape or get swallowed by the role. And if they don't unlearn the script forced onto them, they may spend their whole life believing they are what they were made to be, the problem. Type 2. The manipulator. Have you ever felt like control was the only way to survive? In a toxic home, power is everything, and some children learn to take it before it's taken from them. The manipulator is the child who adapts not by fighting, fleeing, or fading, but by controlling. They are the strategists, the one who learns to read every shift in tone, every flicker of expression, calculating how to stay ahead. In a chaotic family, they realize early that honesty is a weakness, emotions are liabilities, and survival means playing the game better than everyone else. Like lying to stop an argument, manipulate a situation to keep himself safe. They don't manipulate for fun. They do it because they've learned that direct confrontation leads to pain. If their parents lie, they become better liars. If love is conditional, they figure out exactly what to say or do to get what they need. They learn to play people against each other, to twist situations in their favor, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Psychological studies on Machiavellian intelligence by Byrne and Whiten suggest that in unpredictable environments, deception can be an adaptive survival strategy, especially for those who lack physical or social power. But manipulation is a double-edged sword. What begins as a survival mechanism becomes second nature, and over time, trust becomes impossible. The manipulator may grow into an adult who sees relationships as transactions, people as tools, and vulnerability as a threat. They may succeed in the outside world, charismatic, persuasive, always in control, but inside, they are just trapped. Because in the end, control is an illusion, and the child, who once played the game to survive, may find themselves unable to stop long after the war is over. Type 3. The escape artist.
Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own home, but never really seen? Not every child fights back. Some just disappear.
The escape artist, often called the lost child, doesn't argue, doesn't act out, doesn't demand attention. They've learned that in a chaotic home, the safest place to be is unseen. So they slip into the background, quiet, obedient, no trouble at all. They retreat into books, video games, imaginary worlds, anywhere but reality. But avoidance has a cost. The escape artist misses out on more than just family conflict. They miss out on themselves. They can't argue with anyone, while others develop social skills through arguments, friendships, and mistakes. They stay in their bubble, emotionally underdeveloped. Over time, this turns into isolation, making it harder and harder to connect with the outside world. The escape artist isn't emotionless. They feel everything, but expressing it seems pointless. No one asked how they felt before, so why start now? They don't ask for help because they've convinced themselves they don't need it. And the greatest tragedy? They never really got the chance to figure out who they are, only who they had to be to survive. A life spent running eventually becomes a life wasted. If the escape artist never stops retreating, they risk fading into their own shadow, forever present, yet never truly alive. Type 4. The hero. Some children don't shine because they love the light. They shine because the shadows behind them are unbearable. The performer, often called the hero, grows up believing that love is earned, not given. They become the straight-A student, the golden child, the one who always makes the family look good. If their parent is cruel, they try to be kind. If their home is unstable, they become the anchor. If nothing is ever good enough, they push themselves harder. They wear excellence like armor, thinking it will protect them. But beneath the achievements is a child running on empty. Their worth is tied to performance because, in a toxic home, love comes with conditions. They aren't allowed to fail, break down, or rest, because failure means rejection. Even when they succeed, the praise is hollow. A toxic parent may use their success to boost their own image, or worse, resent them for it. Either way, the performer keeps chasing validation, hoping that if they shine bright enough, they'll finally be seen. Psychologists call this contingent self-worth by Deci and Ryan, when a person's self-esteem depends entirely on external validation. This creates a cycle where they keep achieving, yet never feel enough. And if they do fail, the shame is unbearable because they've never learned that love should exist beyond performance. The hero grows up into the tireless worker, the perfectionist, the one who never rests. They fear becoming like their parents, yet they carry their parents' voices in their head. Until they break the cycle, they will always be running, chasing an approval that was never theirs to earn in the first place.
Type 5. The pawn.
Have you ever felt like your life wasn't your own? Like you were just a piece in someone else's game? Some children aren't raised, they're used.
The pawn is the child caught in the middle of family power struggles, not as a participant, but as a tool. They are the weapon in their parents' battles, the leverage in divorce, the proof of loyalty in a toxic marriage. Their worth isn't defined by who they are, but by how useful they can be. If one parent wants to hurt the other, they do it through the pawn. If a sibling rivalry is encouraged, it's because a parent benefits from it. The pawn doesn't get to choose a side. Parents could use them to manipulate someone, or worse, use them to gain something.
At first, they don't realize what's happening. They believe they have a special role in the family, that their closeness to one parent or their importance in conflicts means they matter. But over time, they see the truth. They are disposable. The affection they receive isn't real. It's conditional, given when it serves a purpose and withdrawn
when it doesn't. Research on triangulation in family systems by Minichin shows that children caught in these dynamics develop deep trust issues, struggling with identity and self-worth because they were never treated as individuals, only as extensions of their parents' needs. The pawn grows up hyper-aware of other people's motives, but disconnected from their own desires. They learn to read the room, to predict what's expected of them, but they don't know who they are beyond those expectations. And the most dangerous part, many never realize they were being used until years later, when they look back and see that their childhood was never truly theirs.
Because once the game is over, the pawn is left standing alone, wondering if they were ever really a player at all.
Type 6. The jester. Have you ever felt like you had to make people laugh just to keep the peace? Some children don't tell jokes because they're happy. They tell jokes because silence is dangerous.
The jester, often called the mascot, is the entertainer, the mood lifter, the one who always has a joke ready when the tension in the room is too thick to breathe. They learn early that laughter is a shield, one that protects both themselves and everyone around them. If they can keep their parents distracted, maybe the shouting will stop. If they can make their siblings smile, maybe the pain will feel smaller. Humor becomes their survival skill, their weapon, their escape. But being the funny one is kind of lonely. The jester is never taken seriously even when they want to be. They suffer in silence, too afraid to drop the act because they've built their entire identity around it. Studies on self-deprecating humor and defense mechanisms, Martin et al. 2003, show that people who use humor to deflect pain often struggle with suppressed anxiety and depression. They joke not because they don't feel the weight of their past, but because they fear what might happen if they stop laughing. The jester is everyone's friend, yet no one really knows them. They comfort others, but never themselves. And the great irony? The happier they seem, the less likely anyone is to ask if they're okay. But no one can be the comic relief in their own tragedy forever. At some point, the jester must decide, keep performing or finally take off the mask. That's a topic for another chat. Type 7, the silent protector.
Have you ever felt like it was your job to keep the family from falling apart?
Some children don't just survive in a toxic home, they manage it. But this role is expensive. They learn to put others first, always. They suppress their own needs because in a dysfunctional family, needing something for yourself is selfish. Over time, this creates a dangerous pattern. They grow up into adults who attract broken people, mistaking caretaking for love. Studies on codependency by Beatty suggest that those raised in chaotic homes often seek relationships where they can fix others, because their sense of worth is tied to being needed.
But saving others means nothing if they lose themselves in the process. The silent protector rarely asks, "Who takes care of me?" They don't expect anyone to. And that's the real tragedy, spending a lifetime giving, yet never knowing what it's like to receive.
At some point, the silent protector must face a hard truth. They were never meant to carry everyone else's pain. And if they don't learn to put that weight down, it will crush them.
Type 8, the ghost.
The ghost isn't just overlooked like the lost child. They are forgotten entirely. They exist in the shadows, neither loved nor hated, neither praised nor punished. In a family full of chaos, their absence is more convenient than their presence. No one asks where they've been. No one wonders what's on their mind. They learn over time that being unnoticed is safer than being acknowledged. Unlike the escape artist who mentally retreats but still engages in small ways, the ghost fully erases themselves. They stop expressing opinions, stop forming close relationships, stop taking up space. If they're ever asked what they want, they freeze, because they've never had the luxury of considering it. Psychological studies on emotional neglect in childhood, Spinazzola et al. 2014, show that children who grow up feeling invisible often struggle with identity issues, dissociation, and extreme difficulty forming deep relationships later in life. They never learned how to be seen.
Some ghosts drift through life unnoticed, blending into the background in school, work, and friendships. Others, desperate for proof that they exist, turn to extremes, either isolating themselves entirely or seeking reckless ways to feel something, anything. But the real danger is internal. They don't just feel unseen by others, they stop seeing themselves.
Because when a child spends years learning they don't matter, the hardest thing to do is convince themselves they do. Type 9, the social media butterfly. Have you ever felt like your life only exists when someone else is watching? Some children don't just hide their pain, they bury it under a perfect image. The social media butterfly is the master of appearances. They are the child who learned early that their real life, full of dysfunction, arguments, and loneliness, isn't fit for public view. So they create another one. Every post is curated, every photo polished, every update designed to tell the world, I am happy, I am thriving, my life is beautiful, because if the world believes it, maybe they can too. They aren't just looking for validation, they are building a shield. A perfect image keeps people from asking too many questions, from seeing the cracks beneath the surface. Studies on self-presentation and social media, Chow and Edge, 2012, suggest that those who excessively curate their online personas often struggle with deep insecurities, using social validation as a substitute for genuine self-worth. The social media butterfly isn't necessarily obsessed with attention. They are terrified of exposure. Their real emotions are locked away, and the more likes they get, the more untouchable their facade becomes. But perfection is a prison. The social media butterfly lives in constant fear that someone will see the truth, that behind the bright smiles and well-crafted captions, they are just as lost, just as broken as they've always been. The more they build their fake life, the harder it is to find their real one. Because when your entire identity is based on being seen a certain way, the scariest thing isn't being judged, it's being known. Type 10. The tough guy. Some children don't grow up with support, they grow up learning they're on their own.
The tough guy doesn't ask for anything. Not love, not advice, not a shoulder to lean on. They learned early that no one is coming to save them. If they fell, they picked themselves up. If they struggled, they figured it out. In a toxic family, they saw weakness punished and vulnerability ignored. So they built walls, locked every door, and became entirely self-sufficient. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to.
They pride themselves on independence. They don't rely on others, and they don't expect anyone to rely on them. This makes them seem strong, unshaken, unbothered. But beneath it all, there's a weight they carry alone. Studies on attachment avoidance, Mikulincer and Shaver, 2007, show that children who grow up without emotional support often become hyper-independent adults, struggling to form deep relationships because they've been conditioned to believe that trusting others is a risk. The tough guy is the first to handle a crisis, the last to admit they need help. They don't complain, they don't show fear, and they don't let anyone in, because letting someone in means giving them power to disappoint, betray, or abandon. They would rather suffer in silence than take that chance. Thanks for watching.